Roaring Twenties, an exciting time full of celebration, parties, and art. But the people that erupted during this decade is what made it interesting. Herbert Hoover is a name almost everyone knows. He was a famous mining engineer who did humanitarian work during World War I. He was made head of the Food Administration, which helped reduce food consumption in America. He became famous for this work, which led to him being the Republican nominee in 1928, and won because of his efforts during World War I. He promised peace and prosperity, but this would soon come back to bite him. Hoover believed in leaving businesses and the economy alone. He also believed in rugged individualism, which meant that the government would not get involved with the people's economic issues. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, he refused to help Americans who had lost their jobs and their savings due to banks closing. He became disliked by many and lost the election in 1932 to Franklin Roosevelt. He eventually became a writer on Republican issues and politics. Henry Ford is another famous name everyone recognizes. The most exciting idea was the emergence of the automobile that was affordable for most Americans. Henry Ford was a machinist at the age of 16. He worked for a shipbuilding firm in Detroit. In 1890, Ford was hired as an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company, where he was promoted to chief engineer. The quadricycle was his first prototype. It was the first gasoline-powered horseless carriage. And due to this being his first prototype, he had to sell it to be able to afford the development of the Model T. The Model T was the first affordable car for the American people. Nearly half of all cars were Model Ts. Production lasted from 1908 to 1927. In 1927, Ford constructed the Model A, which was his second success in car building. The Model A was manufactured from 1927 to 1931. Ford revolutionized car building by launching the first moving assembly line for mass production, which meant car building could be 12 hours and cut down to 2.5 hours, and continued to make improvements on his company in Dearborn, Michigan. With every new decade comes new artists, who use the arts to reflect life of that time, and F. Scott Fitzgerald was one of these. He became famous for his first book, This Side of Paradise, but he's better known in our modern world for his book, The Great Gatsby. Both books reflected the life and romanticism of the time. Even with his fame, he still became a drunk. He only became a drunk because his third book, Tender is the Night, didn't sell as well as he thought he had hoped. This led to him moving to California to be a scriptwriter. Louis Armstrong was another famous artist of this decade. Instead of writing books, he played music that reflected the time. He spent his childhood in a place called the Battlefield, which was located in New Orleans. In 1912, Armstrong was arrested and sent to a home for boys, which he then learned his love for music. He replaced Oliver in Kid Ory's band and played on riverboats with a band led by Fate Marvel. He moved to Chicago, where his music career really took off. Louis Armstrong used jazz to reflect the 20s because it was so popular, which makes him an important aspect of the decade. From presidencies to cars to books and to music, the Roaring Twenties had much to offer. Reflecting on this decade is important because in 1929 the Great Depression hit, and it devastated the entire nation, and we still feel the effects today.